Welcome, comrades. Yes. Let the socialism fly. Yeah, been a heck of a day. This is Anthony Smith. This is Conservative Fodder. The most recently insane stuff inside of the left-wing media, the whole entire removal of Joe Biden's son, all the stuff having to do with the laptop is just the absolute iceberg on it. They've got a whole entire group of people that are calling for a truth and reconciliation after the election, assuming that Biden wins, to go and reach out and hunt down the people that are responsible for allowing Trump to have been elected. This quote-unquote so-called disaster that took place due to Trump. Now I ask you guys, has this been a disaster? Are you making more money or less money than you used to? The economy up until the whole entire COVID and the government shutdowns that were done by, the shutdowns that were done by the local governments in liberal-run states caused a huge economic downturn, huge amounts of unemployment, all of which had nothing to do with Trump. Trump has been a fantastic president if you look at it, but the comrades in the media would have you believe in otherwise. These people, if they're honestly going to call for a truth and reconciliation, that sounds an awful lot like putting people in re-education camps and lining them up to be shot up against a wall if they were shown to be too involved with allowing these quote-unquote travesties of Donald Trump. Is this really the kind of government that we want to be a part of? Is these really the kind of people that we want to have running this country? I mean, the whole concept of this country used to be the shining nation on the hill, right? That's what Reagan used to talk about. We were the last bastion of freedom. I'm starting to think we lost. In fact, I'm going to go and read down the columns of communism here, and it looks quite a bit like we've lost. I pull that up here. You go down the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. Abolition of private property and land and application of all rents of land for public purposes. And then there's a little side note here. The courts have interpreted the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution in 1868 to give the government far more eminent domain power than was originally intended under the rubric of eminent domain and various zoning regulations, land use regulations, the Bureau of Land Management, taxes, and environmental excuses. Private property rights have become very diluted, and private property and lands, vehicles, and other forms are seized almost every day in the country under the forfeiture provisions of the RICO statutes on the so-called war on drugs, or if you don't pay your taxes, or half a dozen other things. I mean, the environmental racket is very, very real. In fact, I've been charged with environmental issues due to a vessel sinking. They came in, said I couldn't do anything about the vessel trying to sink, wouldn't let me go and put pumps in it, and they basically seized the vessel under the guise of these environmental standards. So this is very, very real. 2, a heavy progressive and graduated income tax. The 16th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution from 1913, which some scholars maintain was never properly ratified. The various state income taxes established this major Marxist coup in the United States many decades ago. These taxes continue to drain the lifeblood of the American economy and greatly reduce the accumulation and desperately needed capital for future growth of businesses. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. This is another Marxist attack on private property rights. 4, confiscation of property of all immigrants and rebels. We call it government seizure, tax lien, forfeiture, public law. Executive Order 11490, Section 1205 from 2002, which gives private land to the Department of Urban Development, the imprisonment of terrorists of those who speak out or write against the government. Now, you guys need to think about that, especially in times like now when it looks like there's a good possibility we're going to go and get a very, very liberal socialist president in the White House, especially if he ends up getting the House and the Senate behind him. There's going to be nothing stopping him. So those of us that are trying to speak out can be persecuted as terrorists and have our possessions, monies, land, any property seized. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank and state capital exclusive monopoly. I've talked about it before. A Federal Reserve is basically a central bank. Centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. And the U.S. communication and transportation are controlled and regulated by the Federal Communication Commission, established by the Communication Act of 1934, and the Department of Transportation and the Interstate Commerce Commission, established by Congress in 1887, and the Federal Aviation Administration, as well as executive orders of 11490 and 10999. Not to mention various state bureaucracies and regulations. There is also the federal postal monopoly, Amtrak, Contrail, outright socialist government. Conrail, outright socialist government-owned enterprises instead of free market private enterprises. Extension of factories, this is number 7. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, bringing to cultivation of wastelands and improvement of soil generally in accordance with a common plan. I mean, we don't have collective farms, but we do have regulation on farms and subsidies that go out to them. Equal obligation of all work, establishment of industrial armies. You think about the Social Security Administration, the Department of Labor. The national debt inflation caused by the communal bank has caused the need for 2-income families. Number 9, the combination of agriculture, manufacturing industries gradually abolish of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of population over the country. We call it Planning Reorganization Act of 1949. The Superior Corporate Farms, as well as Executive Orders 11647 and the Public Law. 10. Free education for all children in government schools. Abolition of children factory labor in its present form. Combination of education with industrial production. People are being taxed to support what we call, in quotes, public school, which train the young to work for the communal debt system. We also call it the Department of Education. These government-run schools are re-educating. They are, we have a whole process where they've taken kids and under the guise of this whole entire racial inequity stuff that they've been bringing up. I mean, they've been teaching socialist theory for probably the last 2 to 3 generations, and they needed to, because if you just taught it from one generation, you wouldn't have gained anything. You needed to have people in their 30s and 40s that are part of the economic base and actually believe this BS, and that's what they've got. And it's just odd how everybody's kind of gone lock stock with it all, and those of us that are standing up to it are worried about saying too much because of possible persecution. Anyways, we've got the debate going to be rolling here shortly. We're going to have to. We'll be doing commentary like we always have been, but everybody, I hope that this election coming, you guys have stored up on your food. I hope that you've made plans for your family to protect them, because what's coming is going to be, I fear, something akin to a civil war. Anyways, we'll be catching you here after and during the debate.
30 seconds, please, and then I have a question.
Number 1, he says that we're learning to live with it. People are learning to die with it. You folks home will have an empty chair at the kitchen table this morning. That man or wife going to bed tonight and reaching over to try to touch their, out of habit, where their wife or husband was.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's nowhere near that. Come on, man.
We're dying with it because he has never said, he said it's dangerous. When's the last time? Is it really dangerous still? Are we dangerous?
Do we need to really be living in that much fear?
What should they do about the danger?
Of course it's dangerous, but at the same time, living in fear, I mean...
Let me talk about your team.
What happened to the president's... only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
It's not my fault that he came here. It's China's fault. And you know what? It's not Joe's fault that he came here either. It's China's fault. They kept it from going into the rest of China for the most part, but they didn't keep it from coming out to the world, including Europe and ourselves.
Vice President Biden.
Fact is that when we knew it was coming, when it hit, what happened? What did the president say? He said, don't worry, it's going to go away. Be gone by Easter. Don't worry. The warm weather. Don't worry. Maybe in Jack.
And it did slow down. A lot of people thought it did slow down. That's the thing they're not taking into consideration. Had we not locked down and not put people, tell everybody to stay inside, it would have died out.
More people.
The worst thing you can do for a virus like that is keep everybody indoors.
Just to finish this, I was kidding on that, but just to finish this, when I closed, he said, I shouldn't have closed. And that went on for months. What Nancy Pelosi said the same thing. She was dancing on the streets in Chinatown in San Francisco.
There you go.
But when I closed, he said, this is a terrible thing, you're xenophobic. I think he called me racist even, and because I was closing it to China. Now he says I should have closed it earlier. It just, Joe, it doesn't work.
I didn't say either of those things.
You
I didn't say
certainly
should
did.
Yes, you did.
close
You
it.
just said
I
them.
did. I talked about a xenophobia in a different context. It wasn't about closing the border to Chinese coming to the United States.
All right, I want to talk about both of your different strategies to handling
He thought
this.
I shouldn't have closed the border.
Well, let's-
That's obvious.
Do you want to respond to that quickly, Vice President
No.
Biden? Okay. Let's talk about your different strategies toward dealing with this. Mr. Vice President, you suggested you would support new shutdowns if scientists recommended it. What do you say to Americans who are fearful that the cost of shutdowns, the impact on the economy, the higher rates of hunger, depression, domestic and substance abuse outweighs the risk of exposure to the virus?
That's
What I
exactly
would say
right.
is I'm gonna shut down the virus,
cure is
not the
worse than the
country.
disease.
It's his ineptitude that caused the country to have to shut down in large part.
No,
Why
that
businesses
had to
have gone
do
under, why
that had to
schools are
do
closed,
with
why
the
so many
small
people have
local
lost their
governments.
living,
Like I said,
and why they're
states.
concerned.
Why we have states'
Those other
rights.
concerns are
It
real.
had
That's
nothing to
why
do with them.
he should have been,
It's
instead
covered in
of
the
in a sand trap
Constitution.
in his
The
golf
states
course, he should have been
decided
negotiating
to shut
with
down
Nancy
themselves.
Pelosi and the rest of the
Those
Democrats and
liberal ran
Republicans
states.
about
Remember,
what
this was
to
supposed to
do
be a
about
2-week
the acts they were
quarantine,
passing for
and now we're
billions of
going on
dollars
to
make
multiple
sure
months
people had
because
the
of it.
capacity.
And
You haven't ruled out more shutdowns.
These
Well,
states
no,
that
I'm not shutting down today,
that
but there
decided
are-
to keep
look,
them shut down longer
You need
destroyed their
standards.
businesses,
The
have
standard
destroyed their
is, if you have
economies.
a reproduction rate in a community,
once again,
that's above a
very,
certain
very
level,
disingenuous.
Everybody says, slow up, more social distancing. Do not open bars and do not open gymnasiums. Do not open until you get this under control, under more control.
See,
but when you do
now he just
open,
went both
give
directions.
the people the
He
capacity to
said-
be able to open and have the capacity
He said,
to
well,
do it safely.
well, you
For example,
you
schools.
shut too many down,
Schools,
but you should
they
have
need a
shut
lot
these
of money to
places
open.
down.
They need to deal with ventilation systems. They need to deal with smaller classes, more teachers, more pods. And he's refused to support that money, or at least up to now.
Let's talk about schools.
Well,
President Trump,
I
you,
think we have to respond, if I might.
please, and then I have a follow-up.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Look, all he does is talk about shutdowns, but forget about him. His Democrat governors, Cuomo in New York, you look at what's going on in California, you look at Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Democrats,
Washington
Democrats
State,
all,
Jay Inslee.
they're shut down so tight, and they're dying. They're dying. And he supports all these people.
Yep, dying on the
All
vine.
he talks about is shutdowns. No, we're not going to shut down, and we have to open our schools. And it's like, as an example, I have a young son. He also tested positive. By the time I spoke to the doctor the second time, he was fine. It just went away. Young people, I guess it's their immune system.
Let me follow up with you, President Trump. You've demanded schools open in person and insist they can do it safely. But just yesterday, Boston became the latest city to move its public school system entirely online after a coronavirus spike. What is your message to parents who worry that sending their children to school will endanger not only their kids, but also their teachers and families?
I want to open the schools. The transmittal rate to the teachers is very small, but I want to open the schools. We have to open our country. We're not going to have a country. You can't do this. We can't keep this country closed. This is a massive country with a massive economy. People are losing their jobs. They're committing suicide. There's depression, alcohol, drugs at a level that nobody's ever seen before. There's abuse,
And he's absolutely right.
tremendous abuse. We have to open our country. You know, I've said it often. The cure cannot be worse than the problem itself. And that's what's happening. And he wants to close down. He'll close
the
down
more and more we
country
shut these
if
places down, that's what you're
one
going to
person
see.
in
I mean, we're
our-
basically
in our
imprisoning people in their
massive
homes.
Bureaucracy says we should close
I mean,
it down.
Vice President Biden, your
Simply
response.
not
government
true.
imprisonment
We ought to be able to walk and chew gum at the
in
same
these
time.
states.
We ought to be able to safely open, but would they need resources to open? You need to be able to, for example, if you're going to open a business, have social distancing within the business.
So where's
You need to
Biden in
have-
this?
if you have a restaurant,
That's
you need to have
basically what Trump just
plexiglass
said.
dividers so people cannot
He's
infect one
going
another.
through like
You
it's
need
like
to be in a
having a
position where
recording.
you
One
can
of them
take
didn't meet up
testing
with the other. I
rapidly
mean,
and know whether a person is in
he's
fact
just not
infected.
there.
You
I
need
mean,
to be able to
yes,
trace.
of course
You
we
need to
got to
be able
do
provide
things
all
to go
the
make sure
resources
that we
needed
stop the
to do
spread of it,
this.
but not
And
at the
that is not
cost of
inconsistent
bankrupting
with saying that
companies, bankrupting
We're
people.
going to make sure that we open
It's
safely. And by the way,
just
all you
ridiculous.
teachers out there, not that many of you are going to die, so don't worry about it. So don't worry about it. Come on.
President Trump, let me follow up with you quickly.
By the way, I
on-
will say this. If you go and look at what's happened to New York, it's a ghost town. It's a ghost town. And when you talk about plexiglass, these are restaurants that are dying. These are businesses with no money. Putting up plexiglass is unbelievably expensive, and it's not the answer. I mean, you're going to sit there in a cubicle wrapped around with plastic. These are businesses that are dying, Joe. You can't do that to people. You just can't. Take a look at New York and what's happened to my wonderful city for so many years. I loved it. It was vibrant. It's dying. Everyone's leaving New York.
Take a look at what New York has done in terms of turning the curve down in terms of the number of people dying. And I don't look at this in terms of the way he does.
Now,
blue states and red states. They're all.
If you look at what the governor there has done, he's shut down separate and individual zip codes. And a little homework for you guys: if you want to go and look up those zip codes and see what the major religion is for those zip codes.
But they're all American.
They're all Jewish populations. Now the ones where they got little Mexico, they stayed open. They're still allowed to go to church services, go and have food, go and run around in the streets. But the Jewish population in that state are absolutely locked down. They can't go and go to their religious services. They can't go and have their meetings. They can't have funerals. They can't have weddings. That seems awfully odd to me.
What's happening in Pennsylvania, where they've had it closed? Take a look at what's happening with your friend in Michigan, where her husband's the only one allowed to do anything. It's been like a prison. Now it was just ruled unconstitutional. Take a look at North Carolina. They're having spikes, and they've been closed, and they're getting killed financially. We can't let that happen, Joe. You can't let that happen. We have to open up. And we understand the disease. We have to protect our seniors. We have to protect our elderly. We have to protect,
exactly. You go and isolate those that are most likely to get it and let everybody else move freely.
And we will protect them. We have the best testing in the world by far. That's why we have so many cases.
Let me follow up with you before we move on to our next section. President Trump, this week you called Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's best-known infectious disease expert, quote, a disaster. You described him and other medical experts as, quote, idiots. If you're not listening to them, who are you listening to as you fight this?
I'm listening to all of them, including Anthony. I get along very well with Anthony. But he did say, don't wear masks. He did say, as you know, this is not going to be a problem. I think he's a Democrat, but that's okay. He said, this is not going to be a problem. We are not going to have a problem at all. When Joe says that, I said, Anthony Fauci said, and others, and many others, and I'm not knocking him a lot. Nobody knew. Look, nobody knew what this thing was. Nobody knew where it was coming from, what it was. We've learned a lot. But Anthony said, don't wear masks. Now he wants to wear masks. Anthony also said, if you look back, exact words, here's his exact words, this is no problem. This is going to go away soon. So he's allowed to make mistakes. He happens to be a good person.
Vice President Biden, your response quickly, and then we're going to move on to the next section.
My response is that think about what the president knew in January and didn't tell the American people.
He might not have told, but he did act.
This was a serious virus that spread in the air, and it was much worse than the flu. He went on record and said to one
There's
of
a
your
difference
colleagues,
between mortality and morbidity.
that in fact he knew how dangerous it was, but he didn't want to tell us.
Kills less people than the
He
flu.
didn't want us to panic. He didn't want us. Americans don't panic.
This really shouldn't be one of those things we'd be shutting down the country.
In the meantime, we found out in the New York Times the other day.
He says
that,
Americans
in fact,
don't panic.
his folks went
Yes,
to
they
Wall
do.
Street
That's
and
why
said
we've
this
been
is a
having
really
rioting in the
dangerous thing.
streets.
And a memo out of that meeting, not from
Which, by the way, these guys
administration,
have
but from
helped
some of the
move along,
brokers
help
said,
propagate,
"Sell
help
short,
make so
because we gotta get
much
moving."
worse.
It's a dangerous problem.
Well, this
What
is
they want, because they're looking for the more out of control the country gets, the better off
Somebody
they
went to Wall Street.
are.
You're the one that takes all the money from Wall Street. I don't take it.
I have.
You have raised a lot of money, tremendous amounts of money. And every time you raise money, deals are made, Joe. I could raise so much more money. As president and as somebody that knows most of those people, I could call the heads of Wall Street, the heads of every company in America. I would blow away every record, but I don't want to do that because it puts me in a bad position. And then you bring up Wall Street. You shouldn't be bringing up Wall Street because you're the one that takes the money from Wall Street, not me. I could blow away your records.
Fine, you haven't taken money from Wall Street, but you've taken money from the Russians, you've taken money from the Chinese.
Hillary Clinton with a tiny fraction of the money that she was able.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to move on.
Average contribution, $43.
All right, we're going to move on to our next section, which is national security. And I do want to start with the security of our elections and some breaking news from overnight. Just last night, top intelligence officials confirmed again that both Russia and Iran are working to influence this election. Both countries have obtained U.S. voter registration information, these officials say, and Iran sent intimidating messages to Florida voters. This question goes to you, Mr. Vice President. What would you do to put an end to this threat? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
I made it clear, and I ask everyone else to take the pledge. I made it clear that any country, no matter who it is, that interferes in American elections will pay a price. They will pay a price. And it's been overwhelmingly clear this election, I won't even get into the last one, this election, that Russia has been involved, China's been involved
Yeah,
to
you're
some
friends
degree, and now
of
we
Russia
learn
and China.
that Iran is involved. They will pay a price if I'm elected. They're interfering with American sovereignty.
Now, you
That's
also need to
what's
keep in
going on
mind,
right
we've
now.
also
They're
had
interfering with
a
American
president that has
sovereignty.
been
And to the
a
best of my knowledge, I don't
non-warmonger.
think
He's
the
been
president
pulling
said
our
anything to prove
militaries
about
out
it.
of
I don't
other
think he's
countries, and now we
talking a
got
lot. I don't think he
this
said a
gentleman
word.
who
I don't know why he hasn't said a
continued
word to
on
prove about
more
it. And I don't know what
more
he has
battles, more
recently said,
wars,
if
and
anything,
ordered
to the
more
Iranians. My
drone
guess
strikes
is
through
he'd
Barack
probably be more
Obama
outspoken
than
with regard to the Iranians. But
any
the
other
point is this, folks.
any other
We
campaign
are
in
in a
history.
situation where
Because now
we
he's
have
talking about
foreign
getting back at other
countries
countries
trying
for
to
doing things.
interfere in the outcome of our
That's
election.
just lovely.
His own national security advisor told him that what is happening with his buddy, I will. His buddy, Rudy Giuliani, he's being used as a Russian pawn. He's being fed information that is Russian, that is not true. And then what happens? Nothing happens. And then you find out that everything that's going on here about Russia is wanting to make sure that I do not get elected the next president of the United States because they know I know them and they know me.
Of course you
I don't
know them
understand
because you
why
take
this
money from
president
them. I'm sure they
is
don't want
unwilling
you in
to
because
take
they know
on
that you're going to go
Putin
take
when
out
he's
your pound of
actually
flesh.
paying bounties to kill American soldiers in Afghanistan, when he's engaged in activities that are trying to destabilize all of NATO. I don't know why he doesn't do it, but it's worth asking the question. Why isn't that being done? Any country that interferes with us will, in fact, pay a price because they're affecting our sovereignty.
President Trump, same question to you. Let me ask the
Yeah.
question. You're going to have 2 minutes to respond. For 2 elections in a row now, there has been substantial interference from foreign adversaries. What would you do?
By substantial, they mean the drop in the bucket from
Let me
the
respond to
Russians
the
that
first
bought
part,
Facebook
as
ads. Come
Joe
on.
answered. Joe got $3.5 million from Russia, and it came through Putin because he was very friendly with the former mayor of Moscow, and it was the mayor of Moscow's wife. And you got $3.5 million. Your family got $3.5 million, and someday you're going to have to explain why did you get 3.5. I never got any money from Russia. I don't get money from Russia. Now, about your thing last night, I knew all about that, and through John Ratcliffe, who is fantastic, DNI, he said the one thing that's common to both of them, they both want you to lose, because there has been nobody tougher to Russia. Between the sanctions, nobody tougher than me on Russia. Between the sanctions, between all of what I've done with NATO, I've got the NATO countries to put up an extra $130 billion, going to $420 billion a year. That's to guard against Russia. I sold, while he was selling pillows and sheets, I sold tank busters to Ukraine. There has been nobody tougher on Russia than Donald Trump. And I'll tell you, they were so bad. They took over the submarine port. You remember that very well. During your term, during you and Barack Obama, they took over a big part of what should have been Ukraine. You handed
Hope
it to
you guys
them,
don't mind
but
here. I'm
you were
gonna
getting a
grab
lot
a
of
sip of
money
coffee
from
if I
Russia.
can.
They were paying you a lot of money, and they probably still are. But now, with what came out today, it's even worse. All of the emails, the horrible emails of the
I'm going to follow up on the election security.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. We learned
Yes,
this
you have,
president
through your son.
paid 50 times the tax in China, has a secret bank account with China, does business in China, and in fact is talking about me taking money. I have not taken a single penny from any country whatsoever, ever. Number one. Number two, this is a president, I have released all of my tax returns. 22 years. Go look at them. 22 years of my tax return. You have
No,
not
if you're a career
released a
politician, you need to think
single
about this.
solitary
You've got
year
a
of your tax
tax
return.
person that
What are
goes
you
in
hiding?
and makes
Why
your
are you
taxes to be
unwilling?
exactly what
Foreign
people are
countries
expecting
paying
to see.
you a lot.
Russia's
Russia's paying
they've
you
got
a lot.
this whole
China's
thing
paying
set
you a
up.
lot. And your hotels,
Trump's
and
not
all
a
your
career
businesses all
politician.
around
He
the
hasn't
country,
had them all set
around
up
the
a
world.
very
And
specific
China's
way
building a
so
new
that
road to a
it
new
looks
golf
right, that it's
course you have
beyond
overseas.
reproach.
So what's going on here? Why don't release
mean,
your tax return or stop talking about corruption?
President Trump, your response.
What does
First
his
of
tax
all,
return have to do with
I
corruption?
called my accountants under audit. I'm going to release them as soon as we can. I want to do it, and it'll show how successful, how great this company is. But much more importantly than that, people were saying $750. I asked them a week ago, I said, what did I pay? They said, sir, you prepaid tens of millions of dollars. I prepaid my tax. Tens over the last number of years. Tens of millions of dollars I prepaid. Because at some point they think it's an estimate. They think I may have to pay tax. So I already prepaid it. Nobody told me that.
Did your accountant
Nobody
tell you
told
when
you
you
that.
released
Excuse
them?
me. And it wasn't written whenever they write this. They keep talking about $750, which I think is a filing fee. But let me just tell you, I prepaid millions and millions of dollars in taxes. Number one. Number two, I don't make money from China. You do. I don't make money from Ukraine. You do. I don't make money from Russia. You made $3.5 million, Joe, and your son gave you. They even have a statement that we have to give 10% to the big man. You're the big man, I think. I don't know, maybe you're not, but you're the big man, I think. Your son said we have to give 10% to the big man. Joe, what's that all about? It's terrible.
All right, gentlemen, I want to ask you both some questions
I have
about
to
all of this.
respond to
But I'm going to
I
let you
love that
both
he's pulling out
respond
the big
very
guns for it, but
quickly.
he's doing it
You
very
said you spoke to
diplomatically.
your accountant
Yes.
about potentially releasing your taxes. Did he tell you when you can release them? Do you
As
have
soon
a
as the audit is
deadline for
finished.
when you're going to release them
I
to the
get
American
treated
people?
worse than the Tea Party got treated. Because
you
I have a
don't
lot
have
of
a
people in there, deep down in the IRS, they treat me horribly. We made a deal, it was all settled until I decide to run for president. I get treated very badly by the IRS, very unfairly. But we had a deal all done. As soon as we're completed with the deal, I want to release it. But I have paid millions and millions of dollars, and it's worse than paying. I paid in advance. It's called prepaying your taxes. I paid in advance.
I want to ask you
Yep.
both about questions regarding your potential foreign entanglements and questions that have been raised to give you both a chance
Now, if you
to
look at the
talk about
posture,
this
even,
more
you notice how
broadly.
he's
Respond very
almost
quickly, and then I'll get to
leaning
my
against the
Why
pedestal.
did he's been saying this
And
for
then you
4
got
years?
Trump, who's standing there
Show
tall,
us.
proud,
Just
dignified.
show us. Stop playing around. You've been saying for 4 years
Everybody
you're going to
knows.
release your taxes. Nobody knows, Mr. President. What they do know is you're not paying your taxes, or you're paying taxes that are so low. When last time he said what he paid, he said, I only pay that little because I'm smart. I know how to game the system. Come on. Come on, folks.
So
quickly, President Trump, and then I want to get to two questions.
And
to
then
both of
ultimately,
you.
who gives a
I
rip?
was put through a phony witch hunt for 3 years. It started before I even got elected. They spied on my campaign. No president should ever have to go through what I went through. Let me just say this. Mueller and 18 angry Democrats and FBI agents all over the place spent $48 million. They went through everything I had, including my tax returns, and they found absolutely no collusion and nothing wrong. 48 million. I guarantee you, if I spent 1 million on you, Joe, I could find plenty wrong. Because
All right.
the kind of things that you've done and the kind of monies that your family has taken, I mean, your brother made money in Iraq.
Let me-
Millions of dollars. Your other brother made a fortune, and it's all through you, Joe. And they say you get some of it, and you do live very well. You have houses all over the place. You live very well.
All right, gentlemen, let me just ask some questions about all of this broadly. Vice President Biden, there have been questions about the work your son has done in China and for a Ukrainian energy company when you were vice president. In retrospect, was anything about those relationships inappropriate or unethical?
Nothing was unethical. Here's what the deal. With regard to Ukraine, we had this whole question about whether or not, because he was on the board, I later learned of Burisma, a company, that somehow I had done something wrong. Yet every single solitary person, when he was going through his
Now,
impeachment,
he brags
testifying under oath
about
to work for him, said I
getting
did
somebody
my
fired
job
for the benefit
impeccably.
of
I
Burisma.
carried out U.S. policy. Not one single solitary thing was out
This
of
guy
line.
flip-flops
Not a
on the
single
truth.
thing. Number one.
So readily,
Number
it's-
two,
it's
the guy who
spooky.
got in trouble in Ukraine was this guy trying to bribe the Ukrainian government to say something negative about me, which they would
Which
not
they
do
actually
and
have
did not do
proven
because
wrong.
it never, ever, ever happened. My son has not made money in terms of this thing about what are you talking about? China. I have not had it. The only guy who made money from China is this guy. He's the only
Has not
one.
made money. What were you
Nobody
talking about
else has
China? No,
made
we were
money
talking
from
about
China.
the
President Trump,
Ukrainian energy
let me,
company,
let me ask
Burisma.
my question to you.
But
and
could
then
I just
you'll-
one thing?
Very quickly.
His son didn't have a job for a long time, was sadly no longer in the military service. I won't get into that. And he didn't have a job. As soon as he became vice president, Burisma, not the best reputation in the world. I hear they paid him $183,000 a month. Listen to this. 183, and they gave him a $3 million upfront payment.
All right.
And he had no energy.
I'm going to let the vice president
That's
respond to that quickly, and then I need to get to a
dishonest.
question to you. Very
No
quickly,
basis
Mr.
for
Vice
that. Everybody investigated that. No one said anything he did was wrong in Ukraine.
Okay, President Trump, this is for you. Since you took office, you've never divested from your business. You've personally promoted your properties abroad. A report this week, which was referenced, does indicate that your company has a bank account in China. So how can voters know that you don't have any foreign conflicts of interest?
I have many bank accounts, and they're all listed, and they're all over the place. I mean, I was a businessman doing business. The bank account you're referring to, which is everybody knows about it, it's listed. The bank account was in 2013. That's what it was. It was opened it was closed in 2015, I believe. And then I decided, because I was thinking about doing a deal in China like millions of other people. I was thinking about it, and I decided I'm not going to do it. Didn't like it. I decided not to do it. Had an account open, and I closed it.
Okay.
Excuse me. And then, unlike him, where he's vice president and he does business, I then decided to run for president after that. That was before. So I closed it before I even ran for president, let alone became president. Big difference. He is the vice president of the United States, and his son, his brother, and his other brother are getting rich. They're like a vacuum cleaner. They're sucking
Okay,
up money
President
every
Trump,
place
thank
he
you.
goes.
We do need
Not
to
true.
move on.
And this is all very, very
I do want to
accurate.
ask you, Vice President Biden, about China. Let's talk about China more broadly. There have, of course, President Trump has said that they should pay for not being fully transparent in regards to the coronavirus. If you were president, would you make China pay? And please be specific. What would that look like?
What I'd make China do is play by the international rules, not like he has done. He has caused the deficit of China to go up, not down, with China, up, not down. We are making sure that in order to do business in China, you have to give all your intellectual property. You have to have a partner in China. It's 51%. We would not do that at all, number one. Number two, we're in a situation where China would have to play by the rules internationally as well. When I met with Xi, when I was still vice president, he said
So
we're setting
he just
up air
reiterated himself.
identification zones in the,
I don't know if
in
he
the
just
South
forgot
China
where he was
Sea.
going
You
with
can't
it,
fly
but-
through them. I said, we're going to fly through them. We just flew B-52, B-1 bombers through it. We're not going to pay attention. They have to play by the rules. And what's he do? He embraces guys like...
And this is the guy that went
thugs
and is
like
involved with
North
selling
Korea
secrets
and-
to China.
and the
It's
Chinese
odd that I mentioned
president
the
and
B-1.
Putin
It's a
and
stealth
others.
bomber.
And he pokes his finger in the eye of all of our
he
friends, all of our allies.
managed to go
We
and
make
sell
up
some of those secrets
only-
to China,
we're
including our stealth
25%.
technology.
25%.
You know, this
of the
guy's done
world's
nothing
economy.
but
We
hurt
need
this
to be
country for
having
the
rest
benefit
our
of
friends
himself.
with us, saying to
You know,
China,
in fact, I would
"These are
argue
the
that's
rules. You
most
play by them or
Democrats
you're gonna
nowadays.
pay
And
the
what
price
happens to
for
the
nothing,
Kennedy
by the way,
Democrats who,
economically.
you know, were
That's the way
religious
I will
based,
run it,
who
and that's what we did, and upholding
believed
steel
in
tariffs and a range of other things when we were president and vice president.
you know,
All right,
a
and
growing
let's talk about
economy
North
via
Korea.
less
Let me know
taxes,
after his
believed
father
in
then.
compassion,
Very
sure,
quickly, and then we're going to move on.
and
to
believed
$1.5
that when somebody
$1.5
did
from
something
China.
against the country, we
After
stood up
spending
for
10
it, and
minutes
we
in
stood up
office and
against
being
it.
in Air Force Two, number one. Number two, there's a very strong email talking about your family wanting to make $10 million a year for introductions.
President Trump, on China policy, though, what
No, but wait a
specifically are
minute.
you going to do? What specifically are you going to do to make China pay? You've said you're going
First
to
of
make
all,
them pay.
China is paying. They're paying billions and billions of dollars. I just gave
New
$28 billion.
sanctions? New sanctions?
I just gave $28 billion to our farmers. Because
Taxpayers'
China,
money.
It's what?
Taxpayers' money. Didn't
No,
come
no,
from
yeah,
China.
you know the taxpayer is, it's called China. China
Not
paid
true.
$28 billion, and you know what they did to pay it, Joe? They devalued their currency, and they also paid up. And you know who got the money? Our farmers, our great farmers, because they were targeted. You never charged them anything. Also, I charged them 25% on dumped steel because they were killing our steel industry. We were not going to have a steel industry.
Okay.
And now we have a steel
Okay,
industry.
Vice President Biden, your response, please.
Our response is, look, this isn't about, there's a reason why he's bringing up all this malarkey. There's a reason for it. He doesn't want to talk about the substantive issues. It's not about his family and my family. It's about your family. and your family's hurting badly. If you're making less,
in other words,
if you're a
he doesn't
middle-class
want to go and
family,
talk about the actual facts and
You're
figures.
getting hurt badly right now. You're sitting at the kitchen table this morning deciding, well, we can't get new tires.
Come on,
for
Joe.
fall
We were
because
talking
we
about
have to
China
wait
here.
another
Let's
month
get
or
back
so.
onto
Or
it.
are we going to be able to pay the mortgage? Or who's going to tell her she can't go back to community college? They're the decisions you're making. In the middle-class families like I grew up in Scranton and Claymont, they're in trouble. We should be talking about your families, but that's the last thing he wants to talk about.
And most of the Democrat policies have been killers to the middle
10
class
seconds,
that he's
Mr.
just
President,
trying to
10
go
seconds.
make a plea
Political
towards.
statement. Let's get off this China thing, and then he looks, the family, around the table, everything. Just a typical politician when I see that.
Let's talk about
I'm not
North
a typical
Korea now.
politician.
Okay,
That's why I got elected. Let's
about-
get off the subject of China. Let's talk around, sitting around the table.
All right.
Come on, Joe, you can do better.
We're going to talk about North Korea now. President Trump, you've met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un 3 times. You've talked about your beautiful letters with him. You've touted the fact that there hasn't been a war or a long-range missile test. And yet North Korea recently rolled out its biggest ever intercontinental ballistic missile and continues to develop its nuclear arsenal. Do you see that as a betrayal of the relationship you forged? Just 30 seconds here because we need to get on to the next.
So when I met with Barack Obama, we sat in the White House right at the beginning, had a great conversation. It was supposed to be 15 minutes, and it was well over an hour. He said the biggest problem we have with North Korea. He indicated we will be in a war with North Korea. Guess what? It would be a nuclear war, and he does have plenty of nuclear capability. In the meantime, I have a very good relationship with him. Different kind of a guy, but he probably thinks the same thing about me. We have a different kind of a relationship. We have a very good relationship, and there's no war. And you know, about 2 months ago, he broke into a certain area. They said, oh, there's going to be trouble. I said, no, they're not, because he's not going to do that. And I was right. Look, instead of being in a war where millions of people, Seoul, you know, is 25 miles away, millions and millions, 32 million people in Seoul, millions of people would be dead right now.
President
We
Trump,
don't have
that's
a war,
30
and I have a
seconds.
good
Thank
relationship.
you. Vice President Biden, to you, North Korea conducted 4 nuclear tests under the Obama administration. Why do you think you would be able to rein in this persistent threat right
Because
now?
I'd make it clear, which
That's
we're making
pretty
clear
good
to China. They
question.
have to be
Actually,
part
she's
of the
doing a
deal,
pretty
because
darn good
here's
job
the
moderating,
I
to be
made it
perfectly
clear,
honest.
and
She's being
as a
pretty
spokesperson of the
fair, which
administration when I went to China, that they
color
said,
me
why are you
surprised.
moving your missile defense up so close? Why are you moving more forces here? Why are you continuing to do military maneuvers with South Korea? I said, because North Korea is a problem, and we're going to continue to do it so we can control them. We're going to make sure we can control them and make sure they cannot hurt us. And so if you want to do something about it, step up and help. If not, it's going to continue. What has he done? He's legitimized North Korea. He's talked about his good buddy who's a thug, and he talks about how we're better off, and they have much more capable missiles, able to reach U.S. territory much more easily than ever did before.
Let me follow up with you, Vice President Biden. You've said you wouldn't meet with Kim Jong-un without preconditions. Are there any conditions under which you would meet with him?
On the condition that he would agree that he would be drawing down his nuclear capacity to get that the Korean Peninsula should be nuclear-free zone.
All right, let's move on to American families.
They tried
Which, of course, will draw us into
They
war.
tried to meet with him. He wouldn't do it. He didn't like.
Longer sanctions on you.
He just
That's
talks about
why
having a
he
good
wouldn't meet with
relationship.
us.
Sorry, I'm having problems with
All
my
right,
recording
let's
here,
move
but
on. Let's
he's
move
talking
on
about having a good
to
relationship
American
with
President
Hitler
Trump, okay,
before everything happened. Yeah, it was called the Progressive Party.
North
We
Korea
had people
was
that
a
believed in
mess.
eugenics, much
And in
like
fact,
Hitler
move on
did,
to the
and
first
that modern
one.
Progressive Party became the
Tonight.
Democrats.
There was a very
Just
dangerous
throwing that
period
out
in my
there.
first 3 months before we sort of worked things out a little bit.
Okay.
There was a they left us a mess, and Obama would be, I think, the first to say it was the single biggest problem he thought that our country.
Okay, let's move on to American families and the economy. One of the issues that's most important to them is health care, as you both know. Today, there was a key vote on a new Supreme Court Justice, Amy Coney Barrett, and health care is at the center of her confirmation fight. Over 20 million Americans get their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. It's headed to the Supreme Court, and your administration, Mr. President, is advocating for the court to overturn it.
It's another
If the
socialist
Supreme
program.
Court
It should be
does
overturned.
overturn that law, those
the
20 million
government-
Americans could lose their
Yeah,
health insurance almost
they
overnight.
could
So
lose their
what
health
would you
insurance,
do if those people
but then
have
they
their
should be
health
trying
insurance
to go
taken
out
away?
and
You
get
have 2
other
minutes
health
uninterrupted.
insurance.
First of all, I've
American
already
people
done
stop
something that
being
nobody thought
helpless.
was
Stop being
possible.
reliant on the government.
Through the legislature,
You know,
I
get out
terminated
and
the
find
individual
other insurance
mandate.
carriers.
That
And
is
frankly,
the
I had
worst
cheaper insurance
part of
before
Obamacare, as we
Obamacare
call
than
it.
after
The
Obamacare.
individual
And I think
mandate
there's
where
a
you
heck
have
of a
to
lot
pay
of us that are
fortune
in
for
that
the
same
privilege of
position.
not having to pay for bad health insurance. I terminated. It's gone. Now it's in court because Obamacare is no good. But then I made a decision. Run it as well as you can to my people, great people. Run it as well as you can. I could have gone the other route and made everybody very unhappy. They ran it. Premiums are down. Everything's down. Here's the problem. No matter how well you run it, it's no good. What we'd like to do is terminate it. We have the individual mandate done. I don't know that it's going to work. If we don't win, we will have to run it, and we'll have Obamacare, but it'll be better run. But it no longer is Obamacare, because without the individual mandate, it's much different. Pre-existing conditions will always stay. What I would like to do is a much better health care, much better, will always protect people with pre-existing. So I'd like to terminate Obamacare, come up with a brand new, beautiful health care. The Democrats will do it because there'll be tremendous pressure on them, and we might even have the House by that time, and I think we're going to win the House, okay? You'll see, but I think we're going to win the House. But come up with a better health care, always protecting people with pre-existing conditions. And one thing very important, we have 180 million people out there that have great private health care. Far more than we're talking about with Obamacare. Joe Biden is going to terminate all of those policies. These are people that love their health care, people that have been successful, middle-income people, been successful. They have 180 million plans, 180 million people, families, under what he wants to do, which will basically be socialized medicine. He won't even have a choice. They want to terminate 180 million plans. We have done an incredible job on health care, and we're going to do even better.
Okay, Vice President Biden, yes, this is for you. Your health care plan calls for building on Obamacare. So my question is, what is your plan if the law is ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
What I'm going to do is pass Obamacare with a public option, become Biden care. The public option is an option that says that if you, in fact, do not have the wherewithal to be, if you qualify for Medicaid and you do not have the wherewithal in your state to get Medicaid, you automatically are enrolled, providing competition for insurance companies. That's what's going to happen. Secondly, we're going to make sure we reduce the premiums and reduce drug prices by making sure that there's competition that doesn't exist now, by allowing the Medicare to negotiate drug prices with the insurance companies. Thirdly, the idea that
so he wants Medicare to be an insurance company, but he wants to negotiate with insurance companies.
With 20 candidates
the best thing you could do for the insurance racket would be to go and open it up from state to state and allow a healthcare company in, let's say, Florida go and compete against a healthcare company in Washington State. That would actually give realistic competition between insurance companies, and then would allow
pre-existing. There's no way he can protect
a person to actually be able to shop from more than just 3 or 4 different places. There would be literally hundreds of places.
For a long time. He's never come up with a plan. I guess we're going to get the pre-existing condition plan the same time we get the infrastructure plan that we've been waiting since 17, 18, 19, and 20. The fact, I still have a few more minutes. I know you're getting anxious. The fact is that he's already cost the American people, because of his terrible handling of the COVID virus and the economic spillover, 10 million people have lost their private insurance. And he wants to take away 22 million more people who have it under Obamacare, and over 110 million people with pre-existing conditions. And all the people from COVID are going to have pre-existing conditions. What are they going to do?
I have a follow-up for you, Vice President Biden. It relates to something.
And not everybody with COVID is going to have a
pre-existing
condition. That's
medicine.
basically
what do you
horseshit.
say to people who have concerns that your health care plan, which includes a government insurance option, takes the country one step closer to a health care system run entirely by the government? What's your response to that?
It's ridiculous. It's like saying that, we're the idea that the fact that there's a public option that people can choose, that makes it a socialist plan. Look, the difference between the president, I think health care is not a privilege, it's a right. Everyone should have the right to have affordable
Yeah, you got to be
healthcare.
careful saying that, because rights. I mean, we have basic rights that were established through the Constitution. I'm pretty sure that
people who in fact are concerned
you shall have health care was not one of those rights. You have a right for the government to not be an intervention into your life. You have a right for the government to leave you the hell alone.
How many of you home are worried?
The overreaching nature of the government is the reason why we went and separated from England. mean, it was the reason why we pulled ourselves away from that. It was due to too much government intervention from them and too much control. And that's exactly what it causes. When you, for one, you start making people think that that's a right.
He was now there as vice president for 8 years.
Basically, it's making that the government has a right to control you.
3/4. It was,
we need limited government, not more government intervention.
4 years ago. He didn't do anything. He didn't do it. He wants socialized medicine, and it's not that he wants it. His vice president, I mean, she is more liberal than Bernie Sanders and wants it even more. Bernie Sanders wants it. The Democrats want it. You're going to have socialized medicine, just like he went with fracking. We're not going to have fracking. We're going to stop fracking. We're going to stop fracking. Then he goes to Pennsylvania after he gets a nomination, where he got very lucky to get it. And he goes to Pennsylvania, and he says, oh, we're going to have fracking. And you never asked that question. And by the way, so far, I respect very much the way you're handling this, I have to say.
By the way.
But somebody should ask the question.
You can ask.
He goes for a year. There will be
We have
no fracking.
we have a number of topics.
No, but that's a big question.
We're going to get to.
It's the same thing with socialized
I have to
medicine.
respond.
Vice President, your response, please.
My response is people deserve to have affordable health care, period. Period, period, period. And the Biden care proposal will, in fact, provide for that affordable health care, lower premiums. What we're going to do is going to cost some money. It's going to cost over $750 billion over 10 years.
Yeah,
to do
when you got a country that its whole entire economy only produces $4 trillion, and we're passing bills that are $3 and $4 trillion, you could literally float the entire economy over some of these bills that we're passing. So let's not spend any more damn money. And that's one of my biggest criticisms of Trump.
He's talking about
those other people because I disagreed with them. Joe Biden, he's running against, and the idea that we're in a situation that they're going to destroy Medicare. This is the guy that the actuary at Medicare said, if in fact, at Social Security, if in fact he continues to withhold his plan to withhold the tax on Social Security, Social Security will be bankrupt by 2023 with no way to make
Social Security already is bankrupt.
This is the guy who's tried to cut Medicare. So no, I mean, the idea.
And what's wrong with that? Allowing, having people be less reliant on the government is not a bad thing.
He tried to get rid of. He tried to hurt Social Security years ago. Years ago. Go back and look at the records. He tried to hurt Social Security years ago.
All right, let's move on. I'm going to move on. Mr. President, I have to move on to the next question.
They said the stock market will boom if I'm elected. If he's elected, the stock market will crash.
Okay, let's move on to the next question very quickly.
Look, the idea that the stock market is booming is his only measure of what's happening. Where I come from in Scranton and Claymont, the people don't live off of the stock market. Just in the last three years during this crisis, the billionaires in this country made, according to Wall Street, $700 billion more. $700 billion more. Because that's his only measure. What happens to the ordinary people?
And what's wrong with that? Then there's a trickle down. They hire more people. More people are making more money off of that. What's wrong with that? More wealthy people means that the system was working. There should be more wealthy people.
He lived there for a short period of time before he even knew it.
We're going to move on to the next question.
And the people of Pennsylvania will show you that.
Let me move on to my next question, gentlemen. As of tonight, more than 12 million people are out of work. And as of tonight, 8 million more Americans have fallen into poverty, and more families are going hungry every day. Those hit hardest are women and people of color.
And that's directly responsible because of the liberal
Mr. President, why haven't you been
states.
able to get them the help they need? 30 seconds here.
Because Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to approve it. I do.
But you're the president.
I do, but I still have to get. Unfortunately, that's one of the reasons I think we're going to take over the House, because of her. Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to approve anything because she'd love to have some victories on a date called November 3rd. Nancy Pelosi does not want to approve it. We are ready, willing, and able to do something. Don't forget, we've already approved 3 plans, and it's gone through, including the Democrats, in all fairness. This one she doesn't want. It's near the election because she thinks it helps her politically. I think it hurts her politically.
All right, Mr. Vice President.
You know, the Republican leader in the United States Senate said he can't pass it. He will not be able to pass it. He does not have Republican votes. Why isn't he talking to his
Because they're adding pork to it that have to do with green energy and in the long run would hurt the economy.
You are the leader of the Democratic Party. Why have you not pushed the Democrats to get a deal for the American people?
Well, I have.
Good
they have
question.
pushed it. Look, they passed this act all the way back in the beginning of the summer. This is like it's not new.
Yeah, no, they passed
there.
3 or 2 different ones.
This HEROES Act has been sitting there. And look at what's happening. When I was in charge of the Recovery Act with $800 billion, I was able to get $145 billion to local communities that have to balance their budgets, and states that have to balance their budgets, so then have to fire firefighters, teachers, first responders, law enforcement officers, so they can keep their cities and counties running. He will not support that. They have not
He has
done
several
a thing
other
for them.
times, you
And Mitch
goofball.
McConnell said, let them go bankrupt. Let them go bankrupt. Come on. What's the matter
he
with
said
you?
let him go
was
bankrupt
passed in
because
the
the
House.
Democrats
It was
were
a
trying to
bailout
add pork
badly
onto
run,
it.
high crime, Democrat, all run by Democrats, cities and states. It was a way of getting a lot of money, billions and billions of dollars to these kids. It was also a way of getting a lot of money from our people's pockets to people that come into our country illegally. We were going to take care of everything for them. And what that does, and I'd love to do that, I'd love to help them, but what that does, everybody all over the world will start pouring into our country. We can't do it. This was a way of taking care of them. This was a way of spending on things that had nothing to do with COVID, as per your question. But it was really a big bailout for badly run Democrat cities and states.
All right,
By the
I
way,
want
if
to.
I get elected, I'm running as a proud Democrat, but I'm going to be an American president. I don't see red states and blue states. What I see is American, United States. And folks, every single state out there finds themselves in trouble. They're going to start laying off, whether they're red or blue, cops, firefighters, first responders, because teachers,
Yeah, because
they have to balance their budget. And the
It has nothing to do with the balanced budgets because you guys have people out there riding in the streets that you've encouraged, and you've
I wanna
got
talk about the
these
minimum
Democrat
wage, gentlemen.
politicians
Mr.
are
Vice President,
folding
we are talking
and
a
are
lot about
defunding the
struggling
police,
small
and you've made it
businesses
so
and
that none of
business
these police
owners
want to be
these
there
days.
anyway, so they're
Do you
quitting
think
in mass
this is the right
numbers.
time to ask them to raise the minimum wage? You, of course, support a $15 federal minimum
Which
wage.
has been an
because
absolute
I think
disaster.
one
They
of the
did
things
it
we're
in
gonna have to
Seattle. It's
do
been
is
an
we're gonna have
absolute
to bail
disaster. How
them
many
out,
companies
too.
have shut down
We
simply
should be
because of
bailing
that?
them out now. Those small businesses. You got 1 in 6 of them going under. They're not going to be able to make it back.
So what the hell
They
does that have
passed
to do with a minimum
package
wage?
that allows us to be able to go
It's gonna
PPP.
more
Money's
bankrupt
supposed to go to
more
help them do everything
businesses.
from organize how they can
And he's
deal
off
with
on
their
a
business
tangent
being
about
open safely.
these businesses hurting.
Schools,
It's fucking
how
insanity.
They can make classrooms smaller, how they can hire more teachers.
I
how
hope
they
the
can put
American people are
ventilation
watching
systems
this
in.
and are
They
slapping their
need
heads
the
going,
help.
Jesus Christ, we need to
Businesses
not
as
have this
well
guy in
as
the office.
Schools need the help, but these guys will not help them. Is not giving them any of the money.
We are going to move on to
Excuse me, one
immigration,
thing very
but I
quickly.
want
He
to
said
get
we
your
have to help our
reaction.
small businesses by raising the minimum wage. That's not helping. I think it should be a state option. Alabama is different than New York. New York is different
Agreed.
from
There's
Vermont.
spots in Texas
Every
where
state is
$15
different.
an hour
It should
would
be a
be
state
You
option.
said
one
that
hell
you
of a
have to
wage.
help.
It's very important. We have to help our small businesses.
You
How
said-
are you helping your small businesses when you're forcing wages? What's going to happen, and what's been proven to happen, is when you do that, these small businesses fire many of their employees.
You said very
Not true,
recently you would
by the way.
consider raising the federal minimum
it.
wage to $15
Say
an
it.
hour. You said recently you would consider raising the federal minimum wage to
What I
$15 an
really
hour. Is
like,
that still the case?
And I would consider it to an extent, but
In a
what I
second
really like,
administration?
in a second administration, but not to a level that's going to put all these businesses out of business. It should be a state option. Look, I've lived in different places. I know different places. They're all different. Some places, $15 is not so bad. In other places, other states, $15 would be
Okay, President
ruinous.
Trump, thank you. Quick
No
response,
one
Vice
should
President
work
Biden.
2 jobs, 1 job, be below poverty. People are making $6, $7, $8 an hour. These first responders, we all clap for as they come down the street.
Where are they
because they've
making
allowed
$6,
us to make
$7
it.
an hour? I
What's
think the
happening?
minimum wage is
They
what,
deserve
$7.40 right
a
now?
minimum wage of $15. Anything below that puts you below.
Yeah,
the
but then
poverty
you've got a
level.
first
And
responder
there is
making
no
$15 an hour,
evidence
and so
that
is the
when
guy
you raise
flipping
the
burgers
minimum
at
wage,
McDonald's.
businesses go out of
No, that's
business.
insanity.
That is simply not true.
We're going to talk
No
about
soul.
immigration. We're going to talk about immigration now, gentlemen, and we're going to talk about families within this context. Mr. President, your administration separated children from their parents at the border, at least 4,000 kids. You've since reversed your zero tolerance policy, but the United States can't locate the parents of more than 500 children. So how will these families ever be reunited?
Children are brought here by coyotes and lots of bad people, cartels, and they're brought here, and they used to use them to get into our country. We now have as strong a border as we've ever had. We're over 400 miles of brand new wall. You see the numbers, and we let people in, but they have to come in legally, and they come in through
But
merit.
how will you reunite these kids with their
Let
families,
me just tell you,
Mr.
they
President?
built cages. You know, they used to say, I built the cages.
Who gives
and
a
then
crap?
they had a picture in a certain newspaper. And it was a picture of these
the
horrible
Statute of Liberty
cages.
says,
And they
give us
said,
your
"Look at
tired
these
and tired.
cages. President
I
Trump
really
built them."
wish it
And then
said,
was
give
determined
us
they were
you're
built.
economically
In
viable and you're
2014,
motivated to work.
That was him.
Do you have a
Built
plan to
cages.
reunite the kids?
Yes, we're working on it very. We're
who gives a
trying very
rip?
hard. But a lot of these kids
Michael
come out
Savage,
without their parents. They come over through
great
cartels and
commentator,
through
great writer,
coyotes and through gangs.
talks about
Vice
language,
President Biden,
borders,
let me
and
bring you into
culture.
this
I mean,
conversation.
without
Quick response and then another
secured
question.
borders
These 500
and
plus
a
kids
national language
came with
and
parents.
a established
They
American culture, we don't
separated
have a
at the
country.
border to
So
make
once
it a
again, who
disincentive
gives a
to come
rip?
to begin with.
These few
Real
aren't
tough.
any
We're really
benefit to this
strong.
country. They
And
are a
guess what?
deficit on it.
They
They're taking money
cannot-
from it.
it's not
And I know
coyotes
from
didn't
a
bring them over.
standpoint
Their
of
parents were
separating
with them.
families,
They
it
got
hurts
separated
the
from their
heartstrings,
parents.
but that's
It
not
makes
what
us
we're
a
talking
laughing
about. He's
stock
not a
and
social worker. He's the
violates
president
every
of the
notion
United
of
States.
who we are as a nation.
Let me ask you a follow-up
Kristen,
question.
they did it. We changed the policy.
Your response
they
to
did
that?
It. We changed.
did not
They built the
separate
cages.
They-
Who built the cages, Joe?
Let's talk about what
Who
we're
built the
talking about.
cages,
Let's
Joe?
talk about what we're talking about. What happened? Parents were ripped, their kids were ripped from their arms and separated. And now they cannot find over 500 sets of those parents, and those kids are alone. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. It's criminal. It's criminal.
Let me ask
Kristen,
you
I will
about
say this.
immigration.
They
Yeah,
went
it's
down
criminal
to
that they
the
came here.
Borders, everything. They are so well taken care of. They're in facilities that were so clean.
But some
and
of them
have gotten
haven't been
such
reunited
But
with
just
their
ask
families.
one question. Who built the cages? I'd love you to ask him that. Who built the cages?
Let me ask about your immigration policy, Mr. Vice President. The Obama administration did fail to deliver immigration reform, which had been a key promise during the administration. It also presided over record deportations as well as family detentions at the border before changing course. So why should voters trust you with an immigration overhaul now?
Because we made a mistake. It took too long to get it right. It took too long to get it right. I'll be president of the United States, not vice president
that's
of the
Joe
United
Biden
States.
all over again,
And the
isn't
fact
it?
is, I've made it very
took too
clear.
long. Like
Within
47
100 days, I'm going to send
years.
to the United States Congress a pathway to
So what the hell is he
citizenship
gonna do
for
now
over
that he hasn't been able to do
11
in
million
47
undocumented
years?
people. And all of those so-called dreamers, those DACA kids, they're going to be immediately certified again to be able to stay in this country and put on a path to citizenship. The idea that they are being sent home by this guy, and they want to do that, is they've gone to a country they've never seen before. I can imagine you're 5 years old, your parents are taking you across the Rio Grande River, and it's illegal. And you say, oh no, Mom, leave me here. I'm not going to go with you. They've been here. Many of them are model citizens. Over 20,000 of them are first responders out there taking care of people during this crisis. We owe them. We owe them.
President,
Kristen,
jump
he
your
had
reaction.
8 years to do what he
How
said
are
he
these
was going
illegals
to do. And I've
first
changed
responders?
without
They would have
having
to
a specific
come up
we
with
got rid
Social
of
Security
catch and
cards and
release.
everything
We got
else
rid
for
of a
employment.
lot of
So you're
horrible
telling me
things
that
they put in
they're not
and
just
that they lived with. But he had
come
8
across the border
years he was
illegally.
vice
Now they're
president.
also
He
applying for
did
jobs that
nothing
people who were
except
born here
build
rightfully
cages
should be
to
taking.
keep children in.
Vice President
Wrong.
Biden, your response.
The catch and release, you know what he's talking about there? If in fact
And,
you had
by the way,
family
it
came across,
it used to
they
not
were
be
arrested.
just enough for you to be born in
They,
this
in fact,
country to
were
be a
given a
citizen.
date
Your
to
parents
show
had to
up
be
for their
citizens
hearing.
in order for
They
you
were
to actually
released. And
qualify
guess what?
for it.
They showed up
What happened to those
for a
days?
hearing. And this is the first president in the history of the United States of America that anybody seeking asylum has to do it in another country. That's never happened before in America. That's never happened before.
Once again, why should we take the tired and
You come to the United
teary?
States and you make your case that I seek asylum based on the following premise: why I deserve it under American law. They're sitting in squalor on the other side of the river.
President Trump, your response,
So
30
important.
seconds, and then we'll move
It
on.
just shows that he has no understanding of immigration or the laws. Catch and release is a disaster. A murderer would come in, a rapist would come in, a very bad person would come in. We would take their name. We have to release them into our country. And then you say they come back. Less than 1% of the people come back. We have to send ICE out and Border Patrol out to find them. We would say, come back in 2 years, 3 years. We're going to give you a court case. You need Perry Mason. We're going to give you a court case. When you say they come back, they don't come back, Joe.
Yeah.
They never come back. Only the really I hate to say this, but those with the lowest IQ, they might come back.
Okay,
But
President
they're
Trump,
very,
let's
very
give
few.
Vice President Biden a chance to respond, and then we're going to move on to the
You
next
don't know
section.
the law, Joe.
Vice President Biden, your response.
Know the law, what he's telling you is simply not true.
Well, check it out. They don't come back.
Check it out.
All right, let's move on
But we don't have to
the
worry
next
about it because they
section.
terminated it, so we don't have to worry about
Let's
it
move
anymore.
on to the next
And you have
section.
500
Directly to these families. Do you understand
You got to
why
remember
these
that
parents
quite a
fear
few
for their
cops
children?
are black.
I do.
So they're talking about
You know, my daughter
about
is a
this
social worker.
this whole
and,
entire race
she's
theory
written a lot
that
about this.
that obviously
She has a graduate degree
cops
from
are
the
racist
University of
against
Pennsylvania in
cops.
social
No, the reality is that
And you
most
know,
cops are out there
one of the
trying to do
reasons
their
why
job.
I ended up working on the east side
And there's
of
quite a
Wilmington,
few black
which
cops
is
out there, especially in a lot of these areas.
90%
They're talking about some of this
was
stuff
to learn
happening,
more
and you've got
about
them
what's
quitting in
going on.
rogues
But I
because
didn't- I never had to tell my
of
daughter,
these horrible
if she's
liberal
pulled
policies
over,
where they're damning the
make sure she
cops.
puts for a traffic stop, put both hands on top of the wheel and don't reach for the glove box because someone may shoot you. But a black parent, no matter how wealthy or how poor they are, has to teach their child when you're walking down the street, don't have a hoodie on when you go across the street. Making sure that you, in fact, if you get pulled over, just yes sir, no sir, hands on top
Which
of the
you should
wheel.
be doing anyways.
Because
It's called
you
respect.
are, in fact, the victim, whether you're a person making $300,000
So a victim mentality. Okay, yeah, great. We teach them that, and that's why we get cops being shot by black men, stabbed.
Institutional racism in America. And we have
the
always
only
said,
institutional racism that
we've
I
never lived up
personally
to it.
see
We
is coming
hold
from
these
the other
truths to be
side.
self-evident. All men and women are created equal. But guess what? We have never ever lived up to it. But we've always constantly been moving the needle further and further to inclusion, not exclusion. This is the first president to come along and says that's the end of that. We're not going to do that anymore. We have to provide for
Because
economic
it's not
opportunity,
it's
better
not
education,
suggesting that we all
better health
should
care,
be the same.
better
It's
access
suggesting
to
that
schooling, better
they are
access to
superior than us. And I
opportunity
say
to
us as in
borrow money
whites,
to start
and that the
businesses.
blacks are superior
All
to the
the things
whites.
we
That's
can
what's
do,
being
and I've laid out a
suggested.
clear plan
That's why
as
you've
to how
got
to do those
policies in
things,
colleges which
just to
go
give
and
people a shot.
mandate they need
It's
to have a
about
certain
accumulating
percentage
the
of
ability to
blacks,
have
certain percentage
wealth as
Asians,
well
certain
as it
percentage
is
of
to be
women,
free from
because you're
violence.
not making all the
President
rules
Trump,
the same and then
question
letting
to
it
you,
play
and let me
out.
remind you of the
You know,
question. I would like
that-
you to speak directly
if you're letting
to
all the
these
rules be the
families.
same and
Do you
let them play out,
understand
that's not
why these
racism.
parents fear for their
Suggesting
children?
that
Yes,
one
I
race
do.
is better than the other
And
is
again,
racism,
he's
regardless
been in
of the
government
color.
47 years. He never did a thing except in 1994 when he did such
And I've
harm
covered this
to the
earlier.
black community. And they were called, and he called them super predators. And he said that. He said it, super predators. And they have never lived that down. 1994, your crime bill, the super predators. Nobody has done more for the black community than Donald Trump. And if you
Which is
look,
true. That's why
with the
the
exception
money that they've been
of
making has
Abraham
gone
Lincoln,
up. They have
possible
more
exception, but the
freedoms
exception of Abraham
under
Lincoln,
Donald Trump. As much as they don't
nobody
want to
has
admit it, it's an
what I've
absolute
done.
fact.
Criminal justice reform. Obama and Joe didn't do it. I don't even think they tried because they had no chance at doing it. They might have wanted to do it, but if you had to see the arms I had to twist to get that done, it was not a pretty picture. And everybody knows it, including some very liberal people that cried in my office. They cried in the Oval Office. 2 weeks later, they're out saying, gee, we have to defeat him. Criminal justice reform, prison reform, opportunity zones with Tim Scott, a great senator from South Carolina. He came in with this incredible idea for opportunity zones. It's one of the most successful programs. People don't talk about it. Tremendous investment is being made. Biggest beneficiary, the black and Hispanic communities, and then historically black colleges and universities. After 3 years of coming to the office, I love some of those guys. They were great. They came into the office and they said, I said, what are you doing? After 3 years, I said, why do you keep coming back? Because we have no funding. I said, you don't have to come back every year. We have to come back because President Obama would never give them long-term funding, and I did. 10-year long-term funding, and I gave them more money than they asked for because they said, I think you need more. And I said, the only bad part about this is I may never see you again because I got very friendly with them, and they like me and I like them. But I saved it. Colleges and universities.
Okay, and we're going to talk about both of your records, but your response to that, Vice President.
My response to that is I never, ever said what he accused me of saying.
No,
The
it's a
fact of
fact
the
he
matter
has
is, in
said
2000,
that.
though,
That's
after
on
the crime
record.
bill had been in the law for a while.
And he
this
called
is
it a
the guy
racial
who
jungle.
said,
It's the reason why he didn't
"The
want
problem
his
with the
kids
crime
to
bill
go
is
to a
not enough
segregated
people in
school.
jail.
Or didn't
There's
want
not enough
segregation
people in
because of
jail.
it.
And go on my website, get the quote, the date when he said it. Not enough people. He talked about marauding gangs, young gangs, and the people who are going to maraud our cities. This is a guy who in the Central Park five innocent black kids, he continued to push for making sure that they got the death penalty. None of them were guilty of the crimes they were suggested. Look, and talk about granted, he did in fact let 20 people, he commuted 20 people's sentences. We commuted over 1,000 people's sentences. Over 1,000. The very law he's talking about is a law that, in fact, initiated by Barack Obama. And secondly, we're in a situation here where the federal prison system was reduced by 38,000 people under our administration. And one of these things we should be doing, there should be no minimum mandatories in the law. That's why I'm offering $20 billion to states to change their state laws to eliminate minimum mandatories and set up drug courts. No one should be going to jail because they have a drug problem. They should be going to rehabilitation, not to jail. We should fundamentally change the system, and that's what I'm going to do.
But why didn't he do it 4 years ago? Why didn't you do that
47
4 years ago, even less than that? Why didn't you do it? You were vice president. You keep talking about all these things you're going to do and you're going to do this, but you were there just a short time ago and you guys did nothing.
We did.
You know, Joe, I ran because of you. I ran because of Barack Obama, because you did a poor job. If I thought you did a good job, I would have never run. I would have never run. I ran because of you. I'm looking at you now. You're a politician. I ran because of you.
All right, Vice President Biden, your response to that, and then I do have some questions for both of you.
Well, I tell you what, I hope he does look at me, because what's happening here is, you know who I am, you know who he is, you know his character, you know my character, you know our reputations for honor and telling the truth. I am anxious to have this race.
Yeah, he's a bullshit
I'm anxious
artist.
to see this take place. The character of the country is on the ballot. Our character is on the ballot. Look at us closely.
Let me ask some follow-up.
Excuse me.
Please respond, and then we're going to have follow-up
If this stuff is true about Russia, Ukraine, China, other countries, Iraq, if this is true, then he's a corrupt politician.
All right.
So don't give me the stuff about how you're this innocent baby. Joe, they're calling you a corrupt politician.
Nobody-
President Trump, I want to stay on the issue of race. We're talking about the issue.
Laptop from hell.
President Trump, we're
Nobody.
talking about race right now, and I do want to stay on the issue of race. President Trump,
And I
you've
have
just
to respond to that.
Please,
Because look,
very quickly.
there are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the five
The
former heads of the
FBI has
CIA,
come out and said
both
very
parties,
specifically that
say
this
what
is
he's
not a
saying
Russian
is
plant.
bunch of garbage.
The current head
Nobody
of
believes it except
the
his and his
intelligence
good friend
community has come out and
Rudy
said that
You
this
mean the
isn't. There's been
laptop is
facts
now another Russia,
that they've been
Russia,
proven
Russia
out.
hoax?
And
You
that's
gotta
exactly
be-
what.
Is this
That's
where you're
exactly
going?
what.
This is
told.
where he's going. The laptop is Russia,
Yeah.
Russia,
Gentlemen,
Russia.
I want to stay on the issue of race.
You
okay?
have to be kidding. Here we
Mr.
go
President,
again with Russia.
We're going to continue
Boy,
on the
boy.
issue of race. Mr. President,
believe
you've
that one.
described the Black Lives Matter movement as a symbol of hate. You've shared a video of a man chanting white power to millions of your supporters. You've said that black professional athletes exercising their First Amendment rights should be fired. What do you say to Americans who say that kind of language from a president is contributing to a climate of hate and
rather
racial
than
strife?
having our
The
First
time
Amendment
I
rights
ever heard of
absolutely
Black
stripped
Lives
away from
Matter,
us.
They were chanting pigs in a blanket, talking about police. Pigs, talking about our police. Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. I said, that's a horrible thing. And they were marching down the street. And that was my first glimpse of Black Lives Matter. I thought it was a terrible thing. As far as my relationships with all people, I think I have great relationships with all people. I am the least racist person in this room.
Well, what do you ask you very quickly, and then I have a follow-up question for you.
Abraham Lincoln here is one of the most racist presidents we've had in modern history. He pours fuel on every single racist fire. Every single one. He started off his campaign coming down the escalator saying he's going to get rid of those Mexican rapists. He's banned Muslims because they're Muslims. He has moved around and made everything
No,
worse
he banned them from
across
a
the
country
board.
that just
He
happened
says
to be
about the poor
Muslim
boys.
heavy.
Last time we were on stage here, he said, I told him to
You know,
stand
considering
down
how
and
many
stand
Islamic
ready.
terrorists we've
Come
had
on.
in this country,
This guy is a dog whistle
and the
about
fact
as big
that
as a fog.
9/11 occurred, I think that was a pretty fair thing to have
happen. And
happen.
then I have a
You
follow-up.
know, he made a reference to Abraham Lincoln. Where did that come in? I mean,
You said
where
you're
did that-
Abraham
No,
Lincoln.
where did that? No. I said not since Abraham Lincoln has anybody done what I've done for the black community.
And I'm saying...
I didn't say I'm Abraham Lincoln. I said not since Abraham Lincoln has anybody done what I've done for the black community. Now, you have done nothing other than the crime bill, which put
oh, God.
Tens of thousands of black men mostly in jail.
All right, let me ask Vice President
because if
Biden
you look
a
at what's
question.
happening with the voting right now,
Let me ask
they
Vice
remember
President
that
Biden
you treated them
about
very, very badly. Just take a look at what's happening out there.
Vice President Biden, let me give you a chance to respond within this context. Crime bills that you supported in the 80s and 90s contributed to the incarceration of tens of thousands of young black men who had small amounts of drugs in their possession. They are sons, they are brothers, their fathers, their uncles, whose families are still to this day, some of them suffering the consequences. So speak to those families. Why should they vote for you?
One of the things is that in the 80s, we passed 100%, all 100 senators voted for it, a bill on drugs and how to deal with drugs. It was a mistake. I've been trying to change this since then, particularly the portion on cocaine. That's why I've been arguing that, in fact, we should not send anyone to jail for a pure drug offense. They should be going into treatment across the board. That's what we should be spending money. That's why I set up drug courts, which were never funded by our Republican friends. They should not be going to jail for a drug or an alcohol problem. They should be going into treatment. That's what we've been trying to do. That's what I'm going to get done, because I think maybe the American people have now seen that, in fact, it was a mistake to pass those laws relating to drug. But they were not in the crime bill.
But why didn't he get it done? See, it's all talk, no action with these politicians. Why didn't he get it done? That's what I'm going to do when I become president. You were vice president,
and
along
you had
with
47
Obama as
years.
your president, your leader, for 8 years. Why didn't you get it done? You had 8 years to get it done. Now you're saying you're going to get it done because you're all talk and no action, Jim.
We got a lot of it done. We released 38,000. We got 38,000 prisoners left from the.
You got nothing done.
38,000 prisoners were released from federal prison. There were over 1,000 people who were given clemency. In fact, we're the ones that put in the legislation saying we could look at pattern and practice of police departments and what they were doing, how they were conducting themselves. I could
once
go
again,
on.
blaming the police
we
again.
began the process. We
Those that
lost an election.
have been
That's why
asked
I'm
and
running
responsible
to
for
win
protecting
back that
us.
election
He's
and change
blaming
his
them.
terrible policy.
I just
response, and then we're
asked
going to move on
one
to
question.
climate change.
Why didn't you do it in the 8 years, a short time ago? Why didn't you do it? You just said, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. You put tens of thousands of mostly black young men in prison. Now you're saying you're going to undo that. Why didn't you get it done? You had 8 years with Obama. You know why, Joe? Because you're all talk and no action.
All right, Vice President Biden, and then we're going to move on to the next section.
We had a Republican Congress. That's the answer.
Well, you got to talk them into it, Joe. Sometimes
All right.
you got to talk them into it.
We're going to move on to our next section,
Like I did with criminal justice reform. I had to talk Democrats into it.
Gentlemen, we're running out of time,
done.
so we got to get on to climate change, please. You both have very different visions on climate change. President Trump, you say that environmental regulations have hurt jobs in the energy sector. Vice President Biden, you have said you see addressing climate change as an opportunity to create new jobs. For each of you, how would you both combat climate change and support job growth at the same time? Starting with you, President Trump, you have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So we have the Trillion Trees program. We have so many different programs.
You know, it's funny. You look back in the records in the 70s and 80s, they were talking about we're going into a global cooling. We're going to have another ice age. That by 1990, if the temperatures drop X, Y, and Z, we're going into a cooling. And then when they found out that wasn't happening, now they're saying warming. The reality is that climate isn't stagnant. Climate literally changes.
Under this administration, we are working
this is all this is a power grab. It's a money grab. It's the means to go and further take down the system, to weaken the country, to to allow for a more economic devastation, and the money going to where the liberal socialists want the money to go to. And now they're combining it with race theory on top of it, and how much that global warming is affecting people of race. It's absolute insanity. The reality of all this is that
the Paris Accord.
It has nothing more to do with anything than trying to go and redistribute the wealth. Send the money from those that have to those that don't by force. You got to remember, the only people that have the ability to come into your house and shoot you for not paying is the government.
The cleanest water,
that should scare the hell out of any of us.
Standards that we've seen in many, many years.
Vice President
and we
Biden.
haven't destroyed our industries.
Vice President Biden, 2 minutes to you, uninterrupted.
Climate change, climate warming, the global warming is an existential threat to humanity. We have a moral obligation.
Once again, how so?
And we're told by all the leading scientists in the world,
as it gets warmer, vegetation grows more, we have better access to food. People do better in warm climates than in cold climates. It's a hell of a lot easier to get cold than it is to get it's a lot easier to get cool when you're too hot than it is to get warm when you're too cold. Less energy is needed. In fact, it would go and help out with this quote-unquote carbon, because less heating would be needed, less oil would be able to be burned.
Environmental organizations as well as labor. People worried
and then furthermore, they need to look at their periodic table, because the reality that a lot of these gases they're talking about is causing an insulation for the global warming to occur, causes a temperature decrease for one, and they're heavier than oxygen and nitrogen, so they fall back down to the earth. If anybody remembers from the fires, at least here in the Pacific Northwest, from the California fires and the fires that are going around in this state, when the smoke was up in the sky and causing a thicker environment and thicker air, it cooled down because the sun couldn't penetrate. So the reality is that none of this makes true, honest-to-God scientific sense.
Hundreds of millions of barrels of oil in the process and creating significant number of jobs. And by the way, the whole idea of what this is all going to do, it's going to create millions of jobs.
They talk about wanting to limit how much oil we're producing. That would make that Russia would be the largest oil producer.
That's what's happening.
It would make things harder for us economically. And then, as I've covered beforehand, we have to be energy independent, simply for the fact that if we keep spending like we're spending, we're eventually going to get taken off as reserve currency, which then literally means we're going to have no means to go and fuel our factories and the ability to go and fuel our military.
And said very strongly, $6,500 will be taken away from families under his plan, that his plan is an economic disaster. If you look at what he wants to do, if you look at his plan, his environmental plan, you know who developed it? AOC +3. They know nothing about the climate. I mean, she's got a good line of stuff, but she knows nothing about the climate. And they're all hopping through hoops for AOC +3. Look, their real plan costs $100 trillion. If we had the best year in the history of our country for 100 years, we would not even come close to a number like that. When he says buildings, they want to take buildings down because they want to make bigger windows into smaller windows. As far as they're concerned, if you had no window, it would be a lovely thing. This is the craziest plan that anybody has ever seen. And this wasn't done by smart people. This wasn't done by anybody. And
he's right about that, because they're worried about the energy inefficiency of windows.
$100 trillion. That's their real number. He's trying to say it was 6. It's $100 trillion. They want to knock down buildings and build new buildings with little, tiny, small windows. I mean, and many other things.
Okay.
And many other things.
Let me have the Vice President respond, and we're running out of time, and we have a lot more questions to get to. So let's hear from the Vice President. I have a number more questions.
I don't know where he comes from. I don't know where he comes up with these numbers.
Queens.
$100 trillion. Give me a break. This plan was endorsed by every major environmental group and every labor group. Labor, because they know the future lies. The future lies in us being able to breathe, and they know.
I'd like somebody to check that. I don't think this is covered by a labor group. And by the way,
the fastest growing industry in America is the solar energy, and wind. He thinks wind causes cancer, windmills. It's the fastest growing jobs, and they pay good prevailing wages, 45, 50 bucks an hour. We can grow and we can be
Except the
cleaner
amount of energy it
if we
takes to
go
build
the
either
route
one
I'm
of them
proposing.
makes them
President Trump,
makes it
please
environmental
respond, and then I have to
prohibitive.
follow.
You have to have them run
Energy
without
independent for the first
assistance
time.
for 20
We
years
don't need all
to
of
be
these countries
to make
that
up
we
for
had
the
to
amount of
fight war
fuel
over
that it
because we
takes to
needed
go
their
and produce
energy.
them.
We are energy independent. I know more about wind than you do. It's extremely expensive, kills all the birds, it's very intermittent, it's got a lot of problems, and they happen to make the windmills in both Germany and China. And the fumes coming up, if you're a believer in carbon emission, the fumes coming up to make these massive windmills is more than anything that we're talking about with natural
He's
gas.
absolutely
which is very
right.
One other thing.
Find me a scientist
Solar.
that said that.
I love solar, but solar doesn't quite have it yet. It's not powerful yet to really run our big.
No,
He was against fracking. He said it. I will show that to you tomorrow. I am against fracking. Until he got the nomination, went to Pennsylvania, then he said, but you know what, Pennsylvania? He'll be against it very soon because his party is totally against it.
Fracking on federal land, I said. No fracking and or oil on federal
Let
land.
me ask this
I
final
did.
question in this section, and then I want to move on to our final section. President Trump, people of color are much more likely to live near oil refineries and chemical plants. In Texas, there are families who worry the plants near them are making them sick. Your administration has rolled back regulations on these kinds of facilities. Why should these families give you another 4 years in office?
The families that we're talking about are employed heavily, and they're making a lot of money, more money than they've ever made. If you look at the country, Hispanic, women, Asian, people with diplomas, with no diplomas, MIT graduates, #1 in the class, everybody had the best numbers. And you know what? The other side wanted to get together. They wanted to unify. Success is going to bring us together. We are on the road to success. But I'm cutting taxes, and he wants to raise everybody's taxes, and he wants to put new regulations on everything. He will kill it. If he gets
And
in,
they will
you
raise
will
the
have a
taxes. Let there be
depression,
no
the likes
mistake
of
on
which
that.
you've never seen. Your 401ks will go to hell, and it'll be a very, very sad day for this country.
All right. Vice President Biden, same question to you. What will you say during your inaugural address to Americans who did not vote for you?
I will say, I'm an American president. I represent all of you, whether you voted for me or against me. And I'm going to make sure that you're represented. I'm going to give you hope. We're going to move. We're going to choose science over fiction. We're going to choose hope over fear.
Fine, choose
We're gonna
science in
choose
regards to the
move
damn
forward because we
masks
have enormous
and COVID, but
opportunities.
that's not what they're going to do.
Enormous opportunities.
Because they
to make
want
things
fear.
better.
They want people to be
We can
afraid,
grow this
because
economy.
afraid
We can deal with
population means
systemic
power.
racism, and at the same time, we can make sure that our economy is being run and moved and motivated by clean energy, creating millions of new jobs. And that's the fact. That's what we're going to do. And I'm going to say, as I said at the beginning, what is on the ballot here is the character of this country. Decency, honor, respect, treating people with dignity, making sure that everyone has an even chance. And I'm going to make sure you get that. You haven't been getting it the last 4 years.
All right. I want to thank you both for a very robust hour and a half, a fantastic debate. Really appreciate it. President Trump, former Vice President Joe Biden, thank you to Belmont University for hosting us tonight. And most importantly, thank you to those watching tonight. Election Day is
Well,
November 3rd.
that was a little
Don't
bit better. It
forget
was a
to
lot
vote.
less
Thank you,
confrontational.
everyone, and have a
We'll
great
kind of see
night.
what everybody says about it tomorrow. See how all was taken. But anyways, once again, everybody get out and vote. Realize that Biden's going to be a job killer. It's going to be literally the end of the union. And I hate to say that, and I don't say that lightly. He is probably the beginning of the end for this country.
Candidates, spouses, and families will join
anyways,
them on stage.
thank you all.
Congratulate them. This is
See you
the
next time.
final debate of this 2020
Conservative Fodder
season. You've been
out.
watching